told you to quiet down, but now you wear a crown. Visionary queen with a spark.
Welcome to You Matter in Business with Ariel Faith, your brand, your story, and your success, because you matter in your business. Welcome to You Matter in Business. We are bringing back Rosie again. Last week, we talked about navigating through some of the major life transitions, talking about some of the core problems that a lot of us face, talking about the four wounds. We talked about some of those things and being able to get the guidance through a coach or a guide or something, and how that helps us to identify these things and learn how to handle them. So I'm going to introduce you again if you have not met Rosie, and please pronounce your last name for me again.
Zilinskas.
Zilinskas. Rosie Zilinskas. She is a certified high-performance career coach who has mastered the art of midlife reinvention. She believes that women 45 and over have unique advantages when pursuing new adventures, including decades of life experience that becomes their secret weapon. Through tools like her story vault methodology, which she's going to share with us today, Rosie helps women reconnect their dominant dreams and transform the empty nest season into the most meaningful and purposeful years. So welcome again, Rosie.
Ariel, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here again.
Yeah, so let's just get into, tell me about this story vault concept. I was reading your information on your website and I ran across that and I said, that's just an interesting concept. And I really don't know what it is. So I'd love you to just dig into that one right away.
Yeah, absolutely. I work with a lot of women in the corporate world. And one of the biggest issues that women encounter or that they ask me, they're like, hey, Rosie, I really need your help in building confidence so that I can start working on advocating for myself. And the thing is that you can't really build confidence without knowing yourself and preparing yourself. And that's where the story vault comes in. And this applies to entrepreneurs as well, too, because now as an entrepreneur, the fact that you're not able to explain to somebody else how you can help them solve their problem, that's part of your problem. So the story vault, specifically in the corporate world, I ask my clients to determine or compile about 8 to 10 different big accomplishments that happen throughout their career. And for each of these big accomplishments, we identify what was the problem, what action did you take, and what was the solution that you and a team provided to resolve that problem.
Cool.
Now, we take those 10 accomplishments in that the problem, action, solution, and then we weave it into a powerful script using powerful words, assertive words, making sure that when you are saying the story, it's concise and it identifies that problem, action, solution, so that when someone asks you, well, what are some of your strengths or weaknesses? Then you can say, you know what? First of all, I want to make sure that you know, or that, well, let me back up. You can say something like, I want to be clear and understand what your problem is, with this particular job opening. And based on that, I want to give you an answer on how I can help you solve the problem because I was able to do this particular accomplishment. And you pull in one of your accomplishments so that you can highlight that. I know that explanation was a little wonky, but it's essentially how you can show how you have contributed to different organizations in the past and having that really strong language. And the strong language comes with practice. It's not just going to come out of thin air. So this is where you have to take time and identify words that are going to be received powerfully and assertive so that you can show that you bring value, that you're going to be visible, that you're able to, again, help them solve their problem.
That's actually brilliant. It goes along with a marketing strategy that I use and that I teach others, but it's the fact that when you're building confidence, sometimes we forget what we have done, or
Yes.
we diminish what we have done, or the boss took the credit and we know that we were either leading the team or the one doing all the work. So, those things happen to us in business. Let's be real. So when we have those stories or a vault of, it's kind of like having a bank
Yes, that's
and
exactly right.
saying, you know what, these are my pieces of confidence that no one can take from me. It's not a bank that can be stolen. It's a bank of achievement. And it's a bank of confidence. So I have done all these things, and being able to put that down on paper or however you want to put it down, but having that as verifiable facts that you can be confident, right? Really helps the woman stop when the argument comes in your head. Well, but I don't. No, look, I've got all these things I've accomplished. Stop. You can tell yourself to look at that story bank. How big is it? And stop saying, and you can have that little argument inside your head where you're like, no, no. And then your story bank comes up and it's got these massive numbers in it. And it's like, oh, well, I can't argue with that anymore.
Exactly. And one other thing that happens too is people ask me, well, what do I do if they ask me a question and I don't know the answer? And I always say it's so easy. You say, you know what? I'm not really sure about that, but I can tell you about this. And then you pull in one of your stories from your story vault so that you can most closely answer the question. And then if you're in an interview and you're thinking, then you can address that question, once you've had time to think about it, because you're always going to remember the one question that you didn't know. So when you've had time to think about it, you address it in the thank you note. So
And I think, at least in my experience, whenever somebody is humble and says, well, I'm actually not sure, but I know I could find out, I know I could do the research to get the answer, but I'm actually at this moment not sure. There's a level of, I would hire that person over the one that I know BS their way through the question.
absolutely.
So I mean, some of that is about your values and your core values coming through that interview. And do I really want to work for a company? I mean, interviews are two ways, right?
Yeah.
It's will they hire me, and do I want to work with them? We tend to forget that second half, I think.
Yeah.
I think people are starting to get a little bit better at that in society, where it's like, wait, man, you may not fit my goal in life and all that other stuff. So I think we're getting a little better at that. But so what is the advantage that you see? So when you're working with women who are in the corporate world, how many get to a point where they want to be on their own? You know what I mean? So there's a point where you're working for everyone else, you're building everyone else up. And that may be where they thrive, which is, everything is fine.
Mm-hmm.
But then there are some that feel like they're not getting to that next level. They've gotten to the top maybe, and they just don't know what next. And that's where maybe self-employment, maybe starting their own company, that's where something else might shift. So when women are in that curiosity phase of that, how can you help them level their life experience kind of as an asset to that venture so it feels solid, not scary? Does that make any sense?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, when I had been laid off for a few months and I wasn't really sure. I mean, I was already doing speaking and I had my podcast and I was doing a variety of things for my company, but I did go and apply for, it was a C-suite position. And I went through the first rounds of interviews. I went to the second round of interviews. It was down to like myself and another individual. And they asked me to do a project. And I started, working on the project. And when I sat down and actually was going to put everything together, I felt nauseous in my stomach. I felt like I was going to throw up. Every muscle in my body was so constricted. And I was like, I can't do it. I cannot go back in the corporate world because at that point I'm 56 now, so it was just a couple of years ago, but I knew that it wasn't the right place for me. So I can't necessarily give you a percentage, but I know that a lot of women, and again, I ended up my career as an executive vice president. I knew, my next step would have been a C-suite position, and I just knew that that's not what I wanted. So it kind of goes back to feeling your body. How is your body responding to whatever situation is happening in your life? And is it something that you want to go to, do or not? So that day after that incident happened with me, the second my husband walked in through the door, I was like, we need to talk because I can't do it. So, and that's happening more and more. So being an entrepreneur like you and I are now, we encounter many women that are entrepreneurs that were in the corporate space that have decided to leave the corporate space because they've had enough of the toxicity and the narcissism and the, burnout and all that stuff. But I talk to, and I'm part of various different networking events, and there's women that are leaving the corporate world pretty much at every meeting that I go to. They're like, oh yeah, I just left my corporate job. Oh, so I don't know what a percentage is, but I know that it's happening more and more because, again, it's that awakening of not just women but individuals that we know we can do better, not in a space where we're so constrained and constricted with the corporate rules and regulations and, things that just make no sense. So, yeah.
Put it bluntly, they just make no sense.
Behind the lens, crafting tales and news.
Bring your marketing, your brand to life with storytelling and strategy. Cut through the noise with clear messaging and compelling visuals that resonate with your ideal client. We bring strategy, story, and visuals to help you with your marketing. Visit arieljoyfaith.com and schedule a consultation and see how we can help you bring your brand to
No
life.
selfies here, just genuine sight. Authenticity in every light.
What do you think the advantages are of a woman who is kind of beyond her child? Her children might be in college, they might be in high school, they might be at a point where they're pretty self-sustaining, not 100%, or they're off, right? They're off on their own. So they've reached that point in life. What's the advantage of a woman at that point in her life to pursue that venture versus a young entrepreneur who just kind of goes for it at 20? What is that advantage that you feel, or is there advantage that you feel a woman has after she has lived through corporate world, whether it's a big company or small company? She's battled the dragons outside.
Mhm.
What are your
Yeah.
thoughts?
So I'm going to bring this back to an Oprah episode that I watched probably like 20 years ago. Oprah Winfrey was talking to Marianne Williamson, and Marianne Williamson, they were talking about the question that you just asked, and Oprah's like, ladies, if you think you had fun in your 20s and your 30s, just wait till you're in your 40s and your 50s, because by then you know what you want, but most importantly, you know what you don't want. You have enough money to support yourself, and you're not sitting next to your boyfriend waiting for the football game to end. You just go do whatever you need to do. So to me, answering your question, that is the biggest golden nugget, that you're older, you've already done, your 20s and 30s. Like, to me, going to a nightclub at this point, it's like, what? I'd rather be in bed, by 9:30, so you know what you don't want. And the knowledge, the wisdom, I'm part of National Speakers Association, and I'm the dean for Speakers Academy. So all these new speakers are coming in, and I'm about, I don't know, 10, 20 years ahead of them, like public speaking and stuff like that, because I did it in my corporate job. But I'm like, if I could just take all the wisdom in my head and transfer it, it would be amazing. But as you well know, with an entrepreneurship, it's constantly changing and evolving and changing and evolving. And once you think you have your thing, you're like, oh, but this is better or different, and then you grow. So just knowing that stability, you have that stability, you have that knowledge, you have that know-how, you're resourceful, and your life is much more stable. So I'm very grateful that I got into entrepreneurship in my 50s than I would have done it in my 20s or 30s. Now, granted, people that are in their 20s and 30s doing it, they're going to go far, they're going to go, but having that stability, that knowledge, that also the knowing of who I am is priceless.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, I agree 100%. Do you have anything that you would say to someone who has a dream, but they have a fear? So they have a desire and a dream, and they're in their corporate job, and they really want to disconnect, but for whatever reason, they're struggling with that disconnection. They feel like if they leave, they're going to fail. If they leave, they're not wanted. If they leave, there's a lot, there's a million fears that come with that. I have a friend of mine that I'm thinking of in particular who has been in the same job forever, and she hates it, and she's hated it for years. But so this person knows she could be in a better place, but for whatever reason stays. So when you're talking to somebody who's stuck, no matter what age they are, how are some ways that you could help them see that they can get unstuck? It's okay to get unstuck. Does that make any sense?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I think you mentioned it, but it comes down to that fear. And it's, again, from the high performance coaching, when I'm working with a client and we identify that it's a fear, then I go through a series of questions. Okay, well, what are the different scenarios that could happen? And then ultimately, what ends up happening is we identify the thing that they most want. And then we come up with a plan. And it doesn't have to be a flushed out plan, like 30 steps. It could be like, okay, well, do some research on what you could do. It always goes back to what you aspire. What is it that you aspire to do? What's the one thing that if you could do anything in the world, what would you do? Start researching that and figure out if you were to do it, how could you implement this? So very simple plan, but it's starting with that fear and then identifying what are you afraid of? Is it, like you said, is it that you're not going to have enough money? Is it you're not going to have insurance? And then every one of those things, well, you could get insurance in, like the whatever it's called now, Obamacare, or, do you have somebody that you can count on, a husband, a spouse, partner, whatever. So just start it, one by one, looking at each of the dominoes and coming up with an option. And again, ultimately, we can come up with a plan.
Awesome. Awesome. So I'm going to leave in the show notes how to get a hold of Rosie and her. If anybody's in the corporate world and they're thinking of spreading their wings, she is a perfect person to connect with. So I'm going to leave her information in there. Is there anything that you are promoting right now that you wanted to share? I know you answered that question, but I don't have the answer in front of me.
Yeah, so on September 1st, I'm going to be relaunching my Unlock the Leader Within membership. It's very affordable. We meet a couple times a month. We do teaching. I do teaching one week, and then the third week of the month, I do coaching. So it's a really good way to get access to me and, just start dabbling into what would it be like to work with a coach. So September 1st, I will be relaunching that. But I guess the biggest thing for me is start figuring out what you want in your career and start identifying that roadmap, because we leave our careers, and same thing with entrepreneurship. A lot of times you think you leave everything on autopilot and then you don't intentionally work on your career or your business. And then years go by and you're still stuck in that same spot. So being intentional, whether it's your business or your career, is key.
All right. Awesome. Thank you. I will share that with the audience too in the show notes. So thank you so much for joining us. I know there's probably a million questions still dancing in my head. I could bring you back again with no question, And I might do that next season if you are up for it. So we'll talk again. But thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us, your experience, and we really appreciate it. Thank you very much, Rosie.
Thank you so much, Ariel. This was wonderful. And I love where the conversation went. And I really wish that people could take the time more to learn about themselves than anything else.
Yes, 100%. Great wisdom. Thank you very much. See you next episode. After all, it is your brand, your story, and your success because I know that you matter in business. Thank you for listening to You Matter in Business podcast. Please follow, share, like, and comment. I would love to hear from you. This podcast is sponsored by Ariel Faith Storytelling Marketing and Your Brand Photographer. The show notes provide more information on how to contact Ariel and more information about this episode. Thank you again.
They told you to quiet down, but now you wear a crown. Visionary queen with a spark, lighting up the dark. Rediscover your own fire, chase the dreams that lift you higher. Redefine your role today, brand new in every way. Build your confidence through my lens, break the walls you put up since. Embrace your power, hear your roar. You are meant for so much more. You are meant for so much more.